Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, greetings to whoever is watching this video. My name is Eleanor Phoenix and I create beauty content while incorporating political and social commentary. Before we get into this video, I want to add a quick disclaimer and a content warning. First of all, I'm not trying to spread hate to anyone in this video. I'm simply bringing awareness to a social issue that I haven't seen anybody properly address. The second is that I will be talking about food, addictions, and eating disorders, so if you're sensitive to these topics, then please be mindful when watching this video. I am in the mood to create something colourful today, and I think the colour that I want to emphasise and focus on is pink. So let's get started. I think the first thing that needs to be mentioned is that the fat acceptance movement is majorly made up of women, especially white women. This is important to point out for two reasons. The first being that the prevalence of severe obesity is higher in females because of a lack of sex disaggregated data within the fitness industry. Calorie counting on a 24-hour schedule is not as applicable for females as it is for males, because females run on a 28-day cycle, not a 24-hour cycle. Our calorific needs vary based on what time of the month it is. During the week before our period starts, known as the luteal phase, our bodies require an extra 100 to 300 calories a day. Our body temperature and metabolic rate will increase around ovulation and stay high throughout the luteal phase, which justifies a slightly higher caloric intake during this period. The second reason why it's important to point out that the fat acceptance and liberation movement is majorly made up of women, especially white women, is that women are fed a lie by the patriarchy and by society that we are not oppressed based on our sex. I have another video coming up that will go into this topic in more depth, so please subscribe if you want to be notified when that comes out. In short, fat women are not being ignored or shunned by doctors or excluded from employment opportunities because they're fat. They're being ignored, shunned, and excluded because they're women. More specifically, they are fat women, and in a society that values women based off of their looks, any woman who doesn't fit into the beauty standards set by society are likely to be ostracized. Fat people are not oppressed. They are often bullied and sometimes discriminated against, and people often make unfair assumptions about them, but it's important to recognize the distinction between oppression and discrimination. Discrimination is the unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people. Oppression, on the other hand, is the prolonged, cruel, or unjust treatment or exercise of authority against minorities. You can be discriminatory towards any one person or group of people regardless of whether or not that person or group of people are a minority. Skinny people can discriminate against fat people, and fat people can discriminate against skinny people. The main difference between discrimination and oppression is that discrimination is treating a person or particular group of people differently, while oppression is the unjust treatment or exercise of power against a minority group. For example, the segregation of black people during times like apartheid in South Africa was a form of oppression, whereas a black person being mistrustful of or hating white people is discrimination. One of those two examples are considerably worse. For clarification, a minority is a social group whose members experience oppression and persecution at the hands of another social one, the majority group. It doesn't necessarily mean that the majority group is made up of more individuals. Often, minority groups vary from country to country. In the USA, minority groups include Black and African Americans, immigrants, women, and the LGBT, to name a few. On the other hand, Black people aren't a minority group in most African countries, although the LGBT and women still are. In Japan, the people who face the most oppression are often foreigners, i.e. anyone who isn't Japanese. Japan has no law against racial discrimination. Consequently, businesses around Japan display Japanese-only signs, denying entry to all foreigners on site. Employers and landlords routinely refuse jobs and apartments to foreign applicants. Japanese police racially profile foreign-looking bystanders for invasive questioning on the street. Legislators, administrators, and pundits portray foreigners as a national security threat and call for their segregation and expulsion. There isn't a single country out there that have laws protecting fat people because there is no need to protect them. Fat people are never murdered simply because they're fat, whereas femicide and police brutality against black people is something that we see on a regular basis. And an important distinction between fat people and actual minority groups is that a minority group doesn't choose to be a minority group. You can't choose your sex, race, gender identity, sexuality, or ethnic background. You can choose to lead a healthy lifestyle. Be that as it may, can we stop pretending like people who are overweight are just lazy? Telling a fat person to eat a salad or go for a run is about as helpful as telling an anorexic person to just eat. The majority of the time, the underlying problem for people who are overweight or obese is psychological. They are not just eating too much and not getting enough exercise because they want to become fat. Usually, they are turning to food as a way to self-medicate because they suffer from depression, anxiety, PTSD, or some other kind of mental illness. And unless these mental health issues are addressed, then they are likely never going to get healthy or lose the excess weight. In the same way that some people turn to drugs or alcohol to self-medicate when they have depression or some other kind of mental health issue, some people turn to food. This addiction to food is known as binge eating disorder. If we can be understanding and empathetic towards anorexics, alcoholics, and drug addicts, then I think we can be understanding and empathetic towards fat people. Although, on a lot of social media platforms, I see more hatred directed towards skinny women nowadays than towards fat women, and people have managed to demonize influencers who suffer from anorexia or bulimia, or some other form of eating disorder that lead to someone being underweight. People seem to think that someone existing in their own body is promoting their lifestyle, but the truth is that the existence of fat people online isn't promoting obesity, and the existence of anorexic influencers like Eugenia Cooney are not promoting anorexia. In the exact same way that me existing online doesn't mean I am promoting being my size. Unless someone is saying, hey, you should strive to look like me, and this is how you can do it, they are not promoting their body or what they look like. And at the end of the day, you are responsible for who influences you, and blaming someone else for your decisions and your reactions is childish. One thing that I've not heard anyone mentioning, and I think it needs to be said, is that obesity is something that really only severely affects rich countries. It is a privilege for you to be living in a country where food is cheap enough and easily accessible enough for people to end up looking like this. This is something you rarely see in developing countries. However, I wholeheartedly disagree with shaming people who are struggling with any kind of addiction, whether that addiction is drugs, food, or alcohol. Fat people need our help and our support, not constant pressure to look a certain way. Our value as human beings have got nothing to do with what we look like. As I mentioned previously, the majority of people who struggle with their weight also struggle with their mental health. The sad part is that it is a constant cycle. They eat because they feel depressed, and then they end up depressed because they don't like what they look like, and the cycle continues. Another thing worth mentioning is that there are genetic factors that make someone more likely to become overweight. Genetics can directly cause obesity and specific disorders such as Bardet-Biedl syndrome and Prader-Willi syndrome. Even so, genes do not always predict future health. Both genes and behavior are needed for a person to be overweight. Multiple genes may increase one's susceptibility for obesity, but outside factors such as abundant food supply or little physical activity are still required. I agree with the general message spread by the body positivity movement, which is to accept your body as it is regardless of size, race, age, and handicaps. But fat liberation and acceptance activists have taken a movement that started off as a positive acknowledgement of beauty being subjective, and turned it into a movement of toxic positivity. People's emotional and physical growth has been stunted because negative emotions are being dismissed, ignored, and invalidated instead of properly addressed. To anyone watching this video who is part of the fat acceptance or liberation movement, you can suffer from any kind of physical health issue, whether that be Prader-Willi syndrome, endometriosis, PCOS, etc., but your body is still your responsibility, and using these excuses to stay overweight is ultimately only going to harm you. Directing your anger and self-hatred towards people who are not responsible for what you look like is also not helping you. Instead of trying to change the world into accepting obesity and calling anyone who disagrees with you fatphobic, you should be focusing on yourself. I promise you, it will be a lot more productive and a lot more rewarding. You deserve to feel good about yourself, and improving your mental and physical health will do that. Self-love and being kind to yourself involves doing what is best for your body and your mind, which means you need to move your body enough and you need to eat enough wholesome, nutritious, high-quality food. It isn't always easy, but it is worth it. That's all I have to say for this video today. I want to thank you all very much for watching. If you want to see more of me, then subscribe to the channel. You can also follow me on Instagram or TikTok if you'd like. It's at EleanorIPhoenix on all platforms. I also have a Twitter account that I never use, and you can follow me on there too. Until next time, peace, love, and respect.